Hello there. Hope you're all doing really well out there with this fantastic world we call coaching and people development. Wanted to jump in before this episode starts to let you know about an event coming up in a few short weeks' time, 14th of April. I've teamed up with the fantastic sports staff at Stuart's Melville College in Edinburgh to bring you Talent Equation Live 2, Talent Equation Live 2 The Revenge, and I'm really excited to be joined by two of the most fantastic people that I've met in my time working within the sports development and coaching industry. I'm going to be joined by Dr. Ed Corlin from Cork Institute of Technology, one of the most engaging, insightful and fascinating speakers that you'll be able to come and learn with, who is just so intriguing with his thoughts and ideas around skill acquisition and athletic development and how we can help young people learn. So he'll be there, and also one of my good friends and mentors, Jamie Edwards from Train Brain, who will be sharing with you his life experiences of working with elite athletes, young people across a range of different contexts and disciplines, particularly with the focus around helping them develop the tools, as he would refer to them as, the tools to be able to navigate their way through a life of sport, particularly with a focus on how we can help them becoming independent and powerful learners. And so the three of us combined will be able to do some speaking, also work in some smaller groups, doing some Q&A, as well as doing some practical activities that will really get people going away with some real life practical things that they can bring straight into their coaching and hopefully help them work in a more effective way with the young people they're engaged with. So I really hope you can join us. It's going to be a great day of learning. Tickets are selling really quickly, so I'd recommend getting on board as quickly as possible. There's going to be a link in the show notes, and also there's an events page on my website if you want to be able to access that and come and join us on the day. Look forward to seeing you if you come. If not, obviously enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
I am delighted to have you two fine fellows, joining me for a conversation around coaching. Scott Mowberry Mark Edwards from the Soccer Coaching Podcast. I was very fortunate and grateful to be invited onto your show and to provide some kind of a contribution. I for the life of me, can hardly remember half of what we talked about, but it's really good to have you back on mine because it's been, as I said before we even started recording, it's been long overdue, and I'd love to know how things have been going and all of the things that you've been sort of learning on the journey, and let's just see where we go in terms of conversation.
Brilliant, Stuart. Yeah, that's
Sounds
great.
good.
Yeah, well, it's awesome to be on your show, and it's a real privilege. I think when you came on our one kindly, quite early on in our journey, just almost a year ago now, we spoke about the fact that one of the reasons Mark and I started the Stock Coaching podcast was off the back of what you were doing on your podcast. Both massive fans of it. It was one of the first ones I ever listened to. I've listened to every single episode since. And you're the reason for our journey. So we're half grateful for you and half we want to see you to kick you in the shins, depending on how the week's gone.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing, wasn't it? We were just saying about that. Like, it's a kind of it's a labour of love, I would have to say, but certainly depends on my mood. But certainly, there's definitely more love, I would say, than there is the labour. And like you say, there's a lot still to discuss, and that's one of the interesting things. There's a queue of people waiting to come back on after my sort of mini sabbatical over Christmas. And I'm really excited about all these different conversations. So I guess where to start? Tell it what's been going on. Tell us about the journey so far. Let's start with the podcast, and then we'll just segue into the coaching stuff that you've been doing. And I know you mentioned earlier on about the parent stuff, so I'd like to drill into that a bit as well.
Okay, go on, Mark. Do you want to start?
I'll kick us off. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I guess it's been 12 months, almost exactly 12 months since we started the podcast. We're 29 episodes in. So we've, I think it was fair to say we had some fun along the way.
Definitely.
A lot of, we talk a lot anyway, Stu, to be honest with you. We spend a lot of Sunday evenings talking over what happened Sunday morning. And
you couldn't tell that, could you? That wasn't obvious, was it?
And we always, whenever we get together, we always say, we're going to keep this to kind of 45 minutes. Let's try and keep it less than an hour. And then an hour and a half later, we're still going through, and I'm giving Scott the sign, come on, we got to cut now, it's too long. But yeah, it's I would say it's been a very interesting 12 months. I personally feel like I've learned a hell of a lot in that time.
I think the hope really was from the outset was to try and focus on the world we're in, which is obviously the foundation phase and working with those younger players, and to try and share our experience, because we'd had 5 years of, like you talk about, going through the wilderness years, and we certainly went through the wilderness years for 5 years and kind of made all the mistakes. And it was just a case of, if someone's starting that journey again, how might we be able to help a little bit just to get them, if not telling them what to do, because we're not in a position to do that, but just getting think about some of the things they might want to consider before they go down that road too far with the players that they've got. And for us, it was about sharing our experiences, but also getting on guests to share their insights too. And what's been really great over the 12 months, I think, is the people we've had on the podcast, which has been really great. Yeah. Yourself and others have contributed, and it's enabled us to keep learning ourselves, but also share that with other people as well that are in the same position we are. And similar to what you do on your podcast, Stuart, that's what it was. We've got quite a targeted audience, but really grassroots coach work in the foundation phase is what we're trying to get to. And just hopefully with some of the stuff we share, just trying to improve their experience and ultimately the players' journeys as well. And from the feedback we've had, I know we're not for everybody, we get that, we do go on too much and I speak way too fast and everything else, but for those that bear with us and can put up with the unprofessionalism that comes along with the podcast, we've had some great feedback, and it feels like we're reaching out to people, and hopefully the ultimate there is that the players that they're working with are hopefully getting a slightly better journey than they might have had otherwise.
Absolutely.
So it's been a good year on that basis.
And as far as the kind of the way you're crafting it, I mean, you mentioned the word unprofessionalism. I certainly resonate with that from the perspective of, and also for talking too much. I mean, I get sort of wide-ranging feedback around, can you make them shorter? But also I get, can you make them longer? And I guess I suppose there's two reasons why mine are the length they are. It tends to be that an hour and a half seems to be the sort of time frame that people have available to be able to have a conversation, but also is meaningful enough to be able to get through some of the subject matter, because it's usually, there's so much to talk about. I find it very difficult to limit it any more than that. Plus there's a selfish reason as well, which is I've always listened to podcasts because I've had various different roles where I've been driving around the country, and most of my journeys tend to be an hour and a half to 2 hours. So I guess I was always thinking that if I can make an episode last than my average journey time, then that would obviously be beneficial. Now that's probably not for everybody, but that there's just the two reasons why it's gone on that long. And I don't think I can. I've tried to. I'd have to make it into a two-parter because, you know, I can't cut off some of these conversations halfway through. I find it hard enough for an hour and a half, to be honest.
I think we found the same thing, haven't we? You know, it's funny when you're timing it, trying to get it to like less than an hour. The first 15 minutes, you're like, oh, we're going to do this. And then suddenly the next 45 minutes has gone past so quickly that you really can't rush it in. And I was the same, Stuart. I think I drive a lot with my work, and if a podcast was 15, 20 minutes, I don't want to have to change on my journey because you're getting distracted. So you want something that's going to get you the whole way there. So it's the same for me. I think, you know what, you just got to do what you feel's right for you. And hopefully people like that, then fantastic. And if they don't, there's loads of good ones out there that have different audiences and different lengths, which will be right for different people. But for us, it was a case of just really going with the flow and seeing what happened. So, it is hard to do anything less than an hour, that's for sure.
Yeah. What we probably need to do is cut down the half an hour before and the half an hour after, right? Just get into the podcast would be all right then.
My problem's also been that the amount of times I've sort of stopped a podcast and then sort of gone brilliant, you know, and then started to have a bit of a conversation with the person that I was having the conversation with. And then that next 15 minutes is pure gold. Yeah. And I'm like, I've stopped recording. I can't believe this. So I also get a little bit like that. You know, I've got a bit of fear that I'm going to miss some really good stuff.
Yeah, I think you concentrate so much, don't you, on the questions you're asking, the responses, you almost forget to free think almost. And when you're free thinking, sometimes more stuff comes out. But when the mic's switched on in front of you, it can stop you thinking as clearly.
So before we started recording, one of the things we were sort of ruminating on was this whole notion of going through this process and learning a lot and sort of exploring different, approaches and ideas and all these sorts of things. And one of the challenges that can bring in terms of, you know a lot and therefore you feel like you need to apply it. But of course, it's so difficult to apply everything, particularly if stuff's new, because you have to go through that process of acquisition and that process of being able to actually, become more comfortable with some of these ideas. So I quite often feel with some of my sessions, I feel quite dissatisfied sometimes because, I think, for example, of like, so for a simple example would be like, I did a session not long ago, and afterwards I came away thinking, well, Rusty wouldn't have done it that way, or Mark, if he was there watching me now, he would have really had a go at me for kind of not framing the the rule of three from the outset and doing me UAEs, and so I've got this kind of constant sort of nagging doubt about the quality of like what's happening and what's being delivered. And so I suppose I said it's like almost like this, like you can have too much knowledge. I think it's a potential danger of kind of being in this field, and I'd just be interested to get your reflections on that topic.
I think for me there's no danger too much knowledge just yet. I'm not quite there yet, but I know what you mean. I think there's two things when you kind of put yourself out there, isn't there? And with any learning journey, you realize as you learn more, you realize how much you don't know, which is one thing I think we both got, Mark, haven't we, from doing the thing. And the second thing is around really your expectation on yourself. You feel like you've got to bring your A game every time, and it's just not realistic. And we were talking about a session that I did at the weekend, and I didn't like it. I mean, it was okay, and there was some good stuff in it. But all I've thought about since was actually just what I could have done better, and it and how the players could have enjoyed the experience more and got more out of it. And I think you just reflect a lot more and probably a lot more critical, and it's a good thing in some ways, but you can be too critical, can't you? And you've got to keep it realistic.
Yeah. I think the other thing as a coach, you kind of strive for perfection a little bit, don't you? And I know the saying it's progress, not perfection, but you certainly strive for perfection, and not because you want it for yourself. You want it for the players you have, for the young boys or young girls. You want them to have the best experience they can have. That's why that's I guess the beauty of reflecting on your session after. But it does put a bit more pressure on you to kind of, as you say, bring your A game every week.
And when you're talking to people, like you mentioned a few big names there and stuff, and when those kind of levels of people and what they do, you aspire to want to get close to the environments they create and the practice they put on and stuff. But being realistic, we're not quite there yet. We're still, we're better than we were 5 years ago. That's for sure, and we're on those journeys. But you kind of got to reflect and probably be realistic about where we are and what we do and how we do it, and just give ourselves a bit more, maybe be a bit more realistic about what we can expect from ourselves as well as from the players that we've got.
Yeah, it's funny. I think it's one of those things where being are reflective. And, you know, I suppose the more you do this kind of thing, well, regardless of whether you're podcasting or not, the more you engage, like you say, in learning and development, the more you engage in conversations with others, and the more you expose yourself to the practice and the and the skills of other people, the more you learn about, you know, like you say, the more you have to learn, but also the more aware you become of what's out there. I mean, I'm constantly amazed by the ingenuity and creativity of people. I mean, I like to think I'm pretty creative. I mean, but in reality, a bit like Guardiola says, I'm actually probably more of a thief than a creator. But I take inspiration from a range of different places, and then I'll tweak stuff, and I'll make something kind of almost like my own, or I'll get an idea from somewhere. But I find you know, there's a couple of people who, I think it's her name's Angie Cotty. She's a hockey coach who works in primary schools. She puts stuff out on Twitter all the time, these little games she does in primary schools. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted by the ingenuity and the creativity. I think it's absolutely amazing. I'm really keen to get her on the show. And that's the bit that I struggle with a little bit, because I sometimes think to myself, come on, mate, you can really push yourself here. You're sort of doing what you know you can do, and you know you're going back to your old favourites. You need to probably stretch yourself now and start to really put some things in place. Now, weirdly enough, when I do that, more often than not, I actually come away. That's when I come away with some of my best coaching experiences, because I've actually put myself into that environment and stretched myself. But there's too many times, I think, where, you know, life and challenges, and, you know, I don't get enough time perhaps to plan, or I don't get enough time to really think through what I'm going to do, and so there are too many times when I'm going there and I'm thinking, right, well, we'll do something that I kind of know is going to work because it's a bit of a banker. Part of that is coming about because I've actually got quite a lot of helper coaches with me at the moment who I'm sort of supporting and mentoring, so I kind of don't want to go too out there with the sessions, because if I don't know that they're going to work okay, then I don't want to put somebody else who's less experienced into that scenario. But I do know that I need to start to stretch a little bit more, and that's probably the bit I'm reflecting on, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's how you learn as a coach. As you said, Stu, you learn as a coach, right, by putting yourself out there, taking in different experiences. Maybe if you've only ever coached a boys' team, maybe you coach a girls' team or do some sessions with girls' teams. Perhaps you do another sport. It's something that I haven't ever kind of thought about or have done. But I think by stretching yourself, that's how you learn. And it is uncomfortable at first, right? You go and do something where you don't know about it, or you haven't been there before. It does feel uncomfortable, but actually after that, later when you reflect on it, and then next time you go into that environment, you feel more comfortable. And for me, that's how you really learn, is by stretching yourself as a coach.
I think part of that as well is, like you were saying, Stuart, that part of the coach evolution is probably you start off not knowing what to do, so you kind of just research and find stuff online that you try and crowbar into your sessions. That's part of it all. And then as you get more confident, you start thinking, okay, what's right for your environment and your players? And that's when you have to start trying to be creative. But I'm not creative at all, and I'm certainly one for pinching ideas. But what I've got better at doing probably is taking those ideas and just adapting them a little bit. And it goes back to the, you know, not necessarily around a constraints-based approach, but certainly around just thinking about the game and how you can just manipulate things slightly to make it work for what you want to achieve with the players that you've got. And I think that's one thing that's been really good over the last year or two that's helped with the players that we've got, because you're not just trying to make something fit just for the sake of it because it looks good with what you've seen on a YouTube video or what you've seen on a website somewhere. And it's thinking that way. So I'd love to create my own ideas more. I'm not that good yet. I need to get better at that. But actually just having the ability to take something that you see and manipulate it right for your environment, that's a stepping stone in the right direction. I think that's been good for us.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's okay, right? It's okay to borrow someone else's session if, as you said, you can tweak it to get the outcomes you want in your session.
Yeah.
So I think it's I think it's great. I think it's common coach practice.
And being confident for it to be messy for a little while. I think the other thing was part of that evolution journey for us as coaches was at the beginning, you want it to look all nice and neat and be really tidy and certainly look like it's kind of working and, be clean and, what the parents are thinking about the session and stuff. So you'd want to make sure it was all neat and looked right and the lines were neatly queued up and the players behaving. Or actually now I embrace the chaos more and the messiness, and I allow the players, a bit of time to figure out the problem themselves before I step in and or make it too easy from the outset. And actually, if it doesn't even work for the whole first time they try a particular practice, fine, we'll try it again in a week or two, and I'm sure we'll get better at it second or third time round. And maybe that comes from confidence of just getting a bit more experience and stuff. But that's part of the journey, is just knowing how to make a session work for you and your players. I think that comes with a bit more of experience and just growing that confidence.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing that I find myself doing is that I would, if I've got a team that I've coached for a while, I find that I'm a bit more adventurous with that team, and I would go out there and I would maybe try new practices, maybe try a new kind of routine with them, try different things. Yeah, I think if I'm going in with a team or a bunch of boys or girls that I haven't coached before, I definitely go back to my
more
kind
tried and
tested staple practices. I know they're going to work. I know that if something comes up, I've got odd numbers. I can do this.
Isn't it?
It's security, yeah. And that's what I find myself doing, actually. It's right or wrongly.
Yeah. I think we get nervous as coaches. I think the players themselves don't really know, do they? They kind of do anything. They'd accept it, when especially younger players. But you as a coach know whether or not you kind of feel comfortable with the session you're putting on. And we all get our favourites, right, Stuart? You kind of go to your go-to sessions and your go-to practices depending on what's going on and the team you've got in front of you.
I suppose I totally agree with that. And like you say, the more you have an understanding of who you have in front of you, and the more you understand about their wants and needs, I then think you can then begin to, be more playful and exploratory, because you know how much they can cope with. I think it would almost be sort of irresponsible to do something entirely experimental with a brand new group, because you wouldn't have had enough knowledge of what their capability is. So it would almost be a bit arrogant, I suppose, which is, I guess, and the converse of that is doing something that's like kind of off the shelf. Because again, off the shelf stuff, you don't know what that group is capable of. So, you kind of know, you build up a repertoire, I think, over your, through your experience of things that are pretty much gonna like work, and so the players will have a good experience and be able to take it on, and you have got enough what's the word I'm looking for? You've got enough comfort with that you're able to then flex it so that you can adjust it nicely for where they are in terms of their ability level. And doing that's really important, I think, because if you like, the first few sessions really are almost like a consultation phase, aren't they? You're sort of seeing what their level's like, what their experiences is like, personalities, exactly, individualities, how they respond to you, what they like, what they don't like. You're doing a lot of stuff, not just the session itself, but you're also starting to sort of probe a little and ask questions and see who responds to what and how they respond to this, that, and the other, and getting a sense of who they are. And I think that, so actually, if you didn't use an activity that you were really, you were very comfortable with, I think you'd be sort of putting yourself in some quite big difficulty there, and that would probably transmit across to them. Yeah, definitely.
And I think for the players as well, if you've got players that aren't so comfortable being in like a chaotic environment straight away, they don't know you as a coach, then I think it's probably better to be on the side of caution first, isn't it, and be safe and create an environment in which the players can just feel comfortable. And like you say, it's probably about that dialing up and dialing down thing, that if you feel like you can do a bit more and you can stretch and challenge and make it a bit more chaotic in the session, then again, maybe with a bit more experience now, you feel like I could do that. I could adjust session in the moment to make it a bit more chaotic and a bit more stretch and challenge for the players. I think, Stu, one thing that we've probably done more recently, and again, this has come up in conversations I've heard on some of the guests you've had on, is we've made our sessions probably slightly less focused on a specific topic. So we've got to explain it better than that, but what I mean is that where before we might have focused on passing or receiving the ball or finishing or something. Now we'll do practices that are just more game-based that would include those things, but it might mean that one player would be focused more on their receiving the ball, one maybe more on passing the ball, and one maybe more on finishing, but within the same practice. And I think, again, that's something where over maybe the last couple of years with the experience has really helped in our sessions, because you don't, like, all the players now are kind of getting an individualized session, but in the scope of the same practice. And I think that's part of this whole evolution as a coach as well, is you're able then to be more comfortable in almost working on multiple situations, but within the same game. Does that have I explained that right, Mark?
I think so, yeah. I think so.
But I think that's just, again, one ways in which, I feel like we've evolved over the last couple of years, and the benefit of actually listening to the guests we've had on, but also listening to other people's podcasts like you and the guests you've had on, and the ideas that they've given us to go out and practice with those, and it's been to the benefit of the players,
So just I want to just expand on that a little bit more, because I like the idea of that. So instead of sort of almost like predetermining what the, say, theme or topic or focus of the session is, what you'll do is you're sort of putting an activity in place, and within that, then working with each individual and almost giving them individual work-ons within the activity, so you're doing an individualized session within the framework of an overall activity that is, I guess, more generic. Is that right? Or
exactly. Much better explaining what I said. Yeah. So you'd have a theme. So I'll give you an example, a practical example. So I'm working with under 8s at the moment with Mark. So they've got a very young age group, very early in their coaching journeys. But our focus over the year is for our players is to. We worked on outwork in term 1, so that's about effort and application and having a commitment to the program and wanting to do well. In term 2, we're working on Outthink, and then in term 3, we're working on Outplay. Now, all 3 of those things are constant throughout the whole year, but we just focus a bit more on one for a term. But obviously within Outwork or within Outthink or Outplay, there's lots of other things to focus on there. So currently we're doing Outthink, and we're working on with the ball. So the players are thinking about, okay, when do I protect? When do I pass? When do I shoot? When do I run with the ball? That's their things. Now, we don't tell them when to do that. We're just planting the seeds about, okay, that should be in your head when you've got the ball. And we've worked on some of the techniques around that so that they know how to dribble, pass, run with the ball, but they're at different levels depending on the player in different ways. So then we would organise a game. It's just a game of football, usually, with goals and things and directional and stuff. But within that, the theme is still Outthink. And we're asking the players to think about when they've got the ball, what they should do. But actually what little Jimmy might need compared to little Lisa can be very different there, because little Jimmy's finish might be fantastic and little Lisa might need to work on her passing, Yeah. So we can almost tailor that game now to work specifically for them and talk to them on a one-to-one, give them some challenges, maybe condition the game so to make it easier if need be, or make it more harder for them depending on where they are on certain things. But rather than where maybe 3 or 4 years ago we'd have been, right, we'll do a passing week this week, we'll do a shooting week this week, we'll do a recovery run session this week, and all the players do the same thing and work on the same thing. And actually for some players that are already really, really good at it was harder to stretch and challenge them, and for some others it was too hard already. Well, this almost enables everyone to get something out of the session in a more generic way, and maybe that works better because the age group we're at, so we haven't got to be too technical with under 8s, obviously. But they enjoy it and don't really they're all getting something out of it.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think the other twist on it is that you have with the ball and without the ball, right, in terms of each of those dynamics, and you can also bring that into the practice as well. So if you're on the Outthink kind of section, then you got to think about it when you've got the ball, and obviously when you haven't got the ball, how can you help your teammate who's got the ball? So we have 3 parts to Outthink. One is when you've got the ball, when your teammates got the ball, and when the opposition's got the ball. So it's those, and obviously there's different things to think about in those situations, but we don't focus on them all at the same time. So currently we focus on Outthink when you've got the ball, but obviously the other stuff's always involved as well. So we don't forget about the outwork and the off the ball stuff. It's just we're not shining the torch on that as much as we are on those other parts, but it's less specific to a technical aspect of the game and more about an approach, or I guess to playing the game. And like I say, I'm not saying it's the perfect solution, but that came all from listening to the stuff that you were speaking about and the guests you had
head on and just planting ideas for us. And I think what you get as an outcome is the players enjoy the sessions because it's very game-based. They're getting individual support around the stuff that they need individually every session, rather than waiting for the session that's most appropriate for them. And from us as coaches, it feels like quite good fun. Yeah. So that, it's an enjoyable experience going for that with the players as well.
And the players, they've got a focus as well, right? So every training session, every match, you ask one of them before, what's the focus? They will know what the focus is. They would talk about all three of them, but they will know it's Outthink this term.
Yeah, and that's right. We take it into the games as well, Stuart. So when we go and play the matches on Sundays, we're trying to move away from the focus being the result, especially for us as coaches, but also for the players. Now, the want to win bit is fine with us, but we want to win doing the right things the right way. And actually, what's more important is if we're working on Outthink, right, in this game today, how good are you in making decisions when you've got the ball? You decide what that decision is going to be, because who knows what you can do and what the opponent's going to challenge you with. But it's down to you to make that decision now. But that's the challenge for today. And we'll look at that and we'll discuss it, and we can rate ourselves out of 10 individually and collectively to see how we've got on around that theme. And that's more important than the result. And I think that just works quite well for the age group that we've got. And that this has all come about, not from a textbook or a learning course. It's come about from listening to the stuff I guess we've had on, but also listening to the things that you've done and covered in the episodes that you've had, which has been really beneficial.
How does so if one of the young players that you're working with, if you're in the Outthink term, how do they demonstrate Outthink, just to sort of bring that to life?
Yeah, so in the game, so we spoke about, obviously this is part of the session, so if we're working on Outthink with the ball, so we'll ask the players, okay, they'll know the three situations in the game when you've got to be thinking either with the ball, teammates got the ball, or the opposition's got the ball. Okay, so if you've got the ball, what are the things you can do with it? So they'll say, I can protect it, I can dribble with it, run with it, I can pass, or I can shoot. That's kind of the main things you can do with the ball. Right, fantastic. Okay, so show me that stuff in the game then, and can you make the right choice at the right times? So we'll play the game, and let's just say, for argument's sake, that one of the players picks the ball up at the feet, and there's a long way from goal, it's a tight angle, and they try to shot. So then we might have a question. So, okay, what were you thinking? I saw the keeper off the line. I thought, okay, fantastic, go again. Or actually, what might have been better was I could have maybe played a pass and then gone forward to get the ball back. So we'll just not every time, but you'll just question, okay, what they saw and why they made the choice they made. Not saying to them, actually, you shouldn't have shot from the edge, you were too far and the angle was too tight. Not at all. If you think that's the right thing to do and there's a rationale for it, then you do it. Fill your boots, because if you can do that, and they always surprise us, the players, with what they can do. But it's more about them just honing in on something now around them thinking, right, when I've got the ball, I have got choices to make. I know I'm only 7 or 8 years old, but I've got choices to make, and I've got a range of choices, but I've got to decide on what's right for me given the environment, the conditions that are around me at that moment in time. How strong is the opponent against me? How many players are around me? Where am I on the pitch? What's the weather like? Which way am I facing? Am I feeling tired right now because I've just done a recovery run for 30 yards? But it's encouraging the players to make those choices based on what they feel and think in the moment, rather than us as coaches saying, right, if you're in the back third, you should not be beating players and dribbling around. You should be passing the ball out of there. And if you're up front, you must be using skills and shooting. No, you do what you think's right for you. Just know what your options are and have the ability to do them. Now, Stuart, if we see something where actually, a player's struggling to beat the player because of, their one-to-one stuff's not quite there yet, well, that's brilliant for us, because we'll work on that. So, part of the session has always been some 1v1 practice or some finishing practice, but at least we know now what we can do, and we could always add a constraint around that to either make sure the player's got more opportunity to get in 1v1 situations, or be in places where they can have a better opportunity to get shots away and things. So we can then adapt the game slightly so it works well for everybody, but also enables those that have got challenges to be challenged or stretched where appropriate.
Yeah, and I think at this age, it's you're planting seeds, aren't you? At this age, as they get older and as they get into 7-a-side, then 9-a-side, that's when all the real decision making comes into play, and it becomes more important, right? Yeah, as you get more competitive football. But at this age, you're kind of planting those seeds, and there probably isn't a wrong or a right a lot of the time. It's just as you rightly said, it's just asking that question: what could you have done? What were you thinking? That kind of thing.
And Stu, you'll know, sometimes a player is very capable of beating 3 or 4 players and grabbing a goal, and sometimes they're not, because sometimes their legs are a bit more tired than they might have been otherwise. Sometimes it's not in their game. So there is not, for me, there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. It's just about them working out, okay, how their bodies work and how they feel, and assessing the situation for themselves. And you've said it before, what we try and do is present challenges to the players. And I think by building around a theme rather than some actual technical tools, if you like, then they find their solutions to those challenges, but with some guidance from us. So we've made them think about the options they've got around passing, dribbling, shooting, protecting, and whatever else. But we haven't told them which one to use. We've not even done an awful lot of work around those techniques, really. We do a bit, but the game's making them do that because it's making them have to beat players, pass, shoot, dribble, or protect. And we do other games around the actual game itself, obviously, that work on those things. But at least they understand why they're doing it, and B, they can understand why it's going to work and help them in practicing the actual games.
So in the game design, then you do have, for example, because I was going to ask you this question: have you sort of explored where you're almost generally specific? And what I mean by that is, so if a game, for example, has a particular emphasis within it. So let's say you're designing a game where there's a lot of elimination possibilities. So in order to kind of succeed at the game, the players have to, by nature of it, they will have to be able to go past the player in a kind of 1v1 or a 2v1 type of situation. So they're exploring different opportunities within elimination. And within that, so let's say that the game has that kind of as an enterprise within it. And that might be where you want to place some focus, just to sort of narrow down the potential opportunities, let's say. So that's where we're gonna zone in on, but still individualize the opportunities and the work-ons for the players within that area of focus. So it might be that, like you say, Jimmy's area of focus might be his ability to kind of utilize a step with his right foot, or his ability to be aware of enough space to be able to then go round a player, or when to maybe make a move. For another player, it might be, kind of jinking, or it might be maybe, kind of utilizing their body in a particular way to be able to shield the ball, to be able to then get the ball somewhere else. I don't know. I'm wondering, do you do that as well? Or is it very much, here's a game, there is a theme to it, but we're going to allow each individual to sort of develop specific things within the array of possibilities that make up football interactions?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I think it would, in the overriding thing, what we'd do, the thing would run for probably about 6 weeks. That's kind of how we do things, so 6 weeks at a time. So we'll work on the players working on outthinking with the ball for about 6 weeks. Now, in that 6 weeks, you'd want them to kind of improve in all areas, so protecting, dribbling, running, passing, shooting. So what we'd say in a game is 1 week a game might be, say we might have, if you've got 4v4, because we've got 8 players most weeks, we might have a 3v3 in the middle, and you might have a player in the end zone either end, where the idea is a 3v3 you have to work the ball to the player in the end zone. So in the middle bit, you've got lots of protecting, dribbling, bit of running with the ball there, and some passing. And then the end zone players, we'll get the ball and have a finish, and we can set the goal up so it's a challenging finish for them as well, and maybe some recovery runs from the defending team. And what you then is you'll position the players probably in the end zone. Everyone will get a chance to play in the end zone, but maybe the players that don't need the challenge so much in the middle, but maybe want to work on the finishing, get a bit longer time in the end zone practice with the middle zone practice. Or you might say in the middle zone practice, actually, if you've got a really good player out there, you might challenge them to try and beat 3 players where they play the ball to the end zone. So you can put constraints around a game that works on different aspects, but all the players doing the same thing. They wouldn't even necessarily know what the other players have been challenged to do, but it would work around it. Well, we played a good game recently where we have 3 goals, and the boys will work in pairs or threes, depending on how many players we've got. And they'll attack towards 2 of the goals, obviously, but they're playing against the other 2 teams. So it's kind of one group against the other 2 all the time. And again, in that game, you've got so much stuff going on around when do I pass, dribble, protect, shoot, that the game's doing it for you. Now, if a player's got a particular challenge around beating a player, or their dribbling skills aren't as strong, then we can put them on a team where they've only got the 2 and the other team have got the 3. So they've got to keep working on that. And what you find is that they find a solution to it. Now, we could do an unopposed practice and teach them lots of skills around how to beat players and step overs and chops, things like that, which is great, and getting ball manipulation skills is really important. But what you'll find is the players will find that 1 or 2 solutions that works for them in that moment, and then that they get success and they get transference into games as well. But the game's done that. So we haven't got to be particularly competent technical coaches. we can offer advice and guidance and certainly do some work around the 1v1 stuff, but the game will do it for them most, and they'll find their solutions. And one player's solution to protecting the ball is very different to someone else's solution to protecting the ball. And one player's solution to making a particular pass is different to another player's way of making a pass. But by playing these smaller sided games and having the theme around the options rather than telling them what to do, enables them to demonstrate that themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think as you get into the session as well, into the game, you tweak it as well. When players are striving, you might want to challenge them a little bit. When they're struggling, you give them support, but you tweak the game as you go through, and maybe make the challenge for somebody who's doing really well a little bit harder, right? Maybe this person who's particularly good at passing, as you said, you should be maybe focus a bit more on 1v1. Today you've got to go around your player, then make a pass.
Or using a less preferred foot, things like that.
Exactly.
So you just try and tweak it in the moment. Again, it was just trying to find. It's back to your point about being creative and designing your own sessions. I'm not very good at that, but taking a session and trying to manipulate it to make it work better for you and the players, I think that's the bit that we've got better at doing. And we've really seen the benefit with the players that we've got, I think, not just in engagement in the sessions, but also in practically in how they've progressed as players. Certainly, we're not going to claim that we could do the same technical practices that you might see if you went to one of the top academies, because that's not the level that we're at. But the players are playing grassroots football for us, and that's not really our role, I don't think, either. Our role is to help the players develop in a way that they feel comfortable developing and with the skills that naturally suit their ability, and this allows them to do that.
So it feels to me like, first and foremost, it's a much more natural developmental environment. So there's loads of scope for individuality. There's loads of scope for creativity. You're not imposing yourselves on them with solutions. You're allowing the solutions to emerge. But what you're doing is you're not just standing back, folding your arms and going, yeah, look at it all happening. You're intervening at the appropriate moments when there are coachable moments, when an individual might have a moment of difficulty or struggle. I had a really interesting moment, actually, on Sunday. I was coaching a group of under 9 girls, and they said to me, so I set the game up, and we're working on a game. It's based on, have you seen Firmino? You know, the
yes.
2 goals. Two goals.
We love that. Yeah.
So similar to that, but with a variation. So again, adaptation, where I put 3 channels on the pitch, and the aim of the game is actually to get them to start to utilize space and also to look to transfer the ball across the field in order to try and exploit space. So what they get is the way the game's played. I put these 3 channels, and they get 2 points if they get the ball to a teammate across from one side channel to another. And
with kind of switching play almost. Switching
play. And if they then convert that to a goal, then it's like they double it up, so they get 2 points. And if they get a goal, it's then 4. If they transfer and then see that the area is blocked and then go transfer again, then that's worth 4. And if they then score, then it doubles up, so that's 8.
Brilliant.
So it's all a bit like, it's a bit crazy, it's a bit chaotic. Because what they end up doing actually is missing the opportunities to go forward, because they're so focused on getting the ball across the field because they want to get those extra points.
That's a good point, because that's one of the things. You don't want the game to take away the realism, do you? You don't want them to do things that aren't natural.
That's right.
I've seen people say, you've got to have 5 passes before you score a goal. Well, why? Because if one pass is the right pass, make the right pass. But there's other ways to encourage passing without putting a number on it. But that's a great game. And just the challenge is trying to create the players to appreciate the concept you're trying to get across, but not opening playing it so it takes away the realism of the game, isn't it? That's the challenge, I think.
Well, that's where I've potentially over-constrained. Because what I've done is I've sort of, like you said, taken the focus away on actually you could go forward and score, but if that doesn't have the same value, then potentially they don't see both. So I've got to so then what I have to do is adapt and manipulate the game rules so that actually you get as much value by going straight as you do by going sideways. But then, so the reason I've done it the other way around is because I want to draw their attention. I want to attract them to the idea that moving the ball across the field might give them an opportunity to be able to score. So it's just at least to draw attention. Now, in time, they've begun to understand that idea, then I might start to take the constraint away. But the reason I was talking about this was what was really interesting was one little girl called Freya came up to me and went, "Can we have a timeout, please?" And I was like, "Of course you can, Freya." So I stopped it, said, "Right, 30-second timeout, get into your huddle." And she went off, and I recorded it, and because I was really interested in what she had to say. And she's saying, "Right, we need to organise ourselves. You need to go over there and organise, and you need to go over there to score a goal, and you need to go over there to score a goal, because we get points if we get the ball across." And I'm like, "This is awesome. I'm loving this." And I went to see the other group and see what they were talking about. And then I asked her, this same girl, Freya, I said to her, "What are you going to do when you haven't got the ball?" And she clearly hadn't thought about that, because all she'd thought about was the goals, right? And she just said to me, "We're going to charge." And I just laughed and went, "Okay, great, go for it."
Yeah. Well, it's funny, Stu, I'd written down before you started saying about the story, peer-to-peer, because that's nothing you get out of this. And I think as coaches, we're so keen to give the players the solution. I understand because we want to be helpful, but that sometimes the best solution, if it's not the player themselves, is their teammate, and watching each other. So if you've got a player struggling, watching the players watching someone do it well, they learn so much more from doing that than they do from us telling them what to do or showing it themselves. And with the example with Freya, just having that conversation, that learning, that is so powerful for the ownership of the experience and confidence, and the impacts they can have with their teammates, and just knowing actually they've got a voice in the game. I think we do really encourage the players to take time out and chat to themselves about, okay, what worked, what's not worked, what can you do better. And that is so powerful, I think, and letting them share their solutions to the problems that they've got is much more effective, I think, than when we tell them the answers or try and help them.
Definitely. That's how they learn, right? They're finding the answers themselves. But I think it also covers all of the different corners as well, right? You're covering the psychological corner because you're really challenging the players. You're challenging them from a social aspect as well with the getting together and finding their own solution. You're covering the technical piece as well because it's in the game. But I think the beauty with that example and what you've spoken about, Scott, the games-based approach is it's just those kind of light bulb moments when you set a game up, you've got constraint, you put your constraints in, you see the players are struggling a little bit, or the young players are struggling, and then all of a sudden they get it, right? Or one player gets it, and then the others start to see this is what we need to do. I remember a few weeks ago with a different underage team, I put a kind of small-sided game on. I think it was a 3v3 in a 20 by 12 box, and there was 2 goals. But the condition was that you couldn't pass over the halfway line, so you had to dribble over the halfway line. And I wanted the players I wanted to try and create 1v1s and put them under pressure and get them on the ball. And they really struggled at first to get out of the half. And it wasn't until one player just realised, actually, I need to get on that ball fast and I need to move quickly through the pitch. And all of a sudden, all of them then started to click on and they switch on, and they're moving the ball quickly. And then you see the other side, that I guess a bit like counter coaching, you see that actually the opposition then switch on to the fact that I need to close them down quickly. Yeah. So you're kind of getting you're getting the dual benefit. Exactly. And you can see it's a game and the players are absolutely loving it. They're really enjoying it.
I think that's where maybe as coaches a few years back we'd have probably stopped after 5 minutes because we'd have been like, oh, it's not working, and do something else. Or actually, now it's almost like, well, if it works straight away, it probably isn't going to be very good. I need to dial it up quite quickly because it should be a bit challenging at first when you get into the practice. And maybe that's the confidence thing again.
Yeah, I think 5 years ago, to be honest, we probably wouldn't have taken on a games-based approach.
No. But neat lines, though.
Neat lines, yeah. Same colour cones.
Oh, yes, always going to be the same colour cone. OCD about that. Getting comfortable with that sort of 10 or 15 minutes of struggle is, I think, one of the big things to overcome, isn't it? Because firstly, you've got to fight your own urge to help, because that's what we're here for. That's what we're designed to do. And letting people struggle feels just wrong and immoral. And then the second side of it is the the sense that you have, because you look around and the players are looking and they're asking what's going on initially. I mean, after a while they start to get used to it, and then the parents, and you're looking at them and they're looking, and you know, when you get the odd parent who wants to tell the child, you know, just do, you know, and you have to obviously sort that bit out too. I always have to have the odd quiet chat. Just let them get there. They'll be there. Don't you worry. And that bit, I think you really have to get comfortable with, don't you? Because that's when, I guess that's where you feel most exposed, isn't it?
Yeah, Stuart, I think that's so true. This is why I think the environment is so important. Where we've started with the younger ones again, second time round, I think we got the environment much better early on. The players are used to a bit of chaos, so that they're okay with it. I think when you bring this in later on, the players are very quick to give up themselves, and no criticism of the players because they're just not used to it. So if it doesn't feel right after 2 minutes when you're 8 years old, you're going to stop playing. You're going to. I don't like it. I'm not enjoying it, and you're going to stop. With the players we've had since under sixes, they're used to the chaos, so they come expecting it to be challenging and being tough and not get it straight away. And I feel for coaches that maybe embrace stuff a little bit later on, for them it's even tougher. But I think if you persevere with it, the players will adjust quite quickly. We know we're young people; they're very adaptable, and they'll get used to this. Yeah. And it's just not giving in too quickly. But certainly when the players start thinking, I don't like it, it's too hard, and you've got parents watching you as well, it must be so hard then to stick with it. But if you can get the environment right and you can embrace the challenge and the players understand, actually, this is going to be good for us and let's see it, and you have a couple of successes, suddenly they buy into it. I think the benefits are so worth it that it's much better than that kind of safe session where, you get limited transference then into real game. If you're playing an invasion sport like hockey and football, who are very similar, aren't they? You think you've got to the practice, your training sessions really have to be competitive. They've got to be chaotic, and they've got to kind of work on more than just technical stuff, because the game isn't just purely technical. In fact, when you play games, its technical part is probably is not such a dominant bit. Everything else comes into force. And I think for coaches, if you started off on the with that approach, is probably fine, but to bring it in, I can see how it could be quite challenging.
Yeah, and I think I absolutely agree. And I think the other big point, and you both mentioned it, is around parents as well. Is kind of almost managing parent expectations. Yeah. Because parents, and I think we spoke about it earlier, that they expect to come to a session to see it perfect, no chaos, everyone scoring goals, and everything running exactly the way it should do. So it's managing that expectation with the parents as well, and I think that takes a bit of pressure off you if you can upfront with them to say, look, this is going to be a bit chaotic, but they'll get it, just bear with us. And then once the parents have seen it for a couple of sessions, they get on board with it. It makes your life easier.
That's something I just wanted to sort of reflect on. So I think the first bit you've done there is something that Mark Bennett talks about, which is the selling the why. So to both the players and players and the parents, to give them a little bit of a sense of, right, what you're going to see here is the approach that we use. The approach is we use a games-based approach, and we're going to get the games, and then we're going to develop things within the game environment, and then we're going to do that. So at the very sense, so that at least when they're first exposed to this, they've got a sense that what to expect. So it's not brand new. I don't have to say I don't always do that, but I do think sometimes it can pay dividends, because it's a bit hard, I think, to expect the recipient and also the major stakeholder in the parent just to sort of buy into your methodology because that's who you are. So I think there is a responsibility to do that, and I do think that pays dividends. So it's great to hear that. I just wanted to reflect on a couple of things. So when we were talking earlier on about how, you sort of, I guess, playing it a bit safe with a group of new players, right? So you probably wouldn't go full hardcore chaos, and you probably wouldn't go like just literally throw in at the deep end necessarily with that new group. You might sort of introduce them to this approach sort of more slowly, so they can become more they're all like playing a game, because they're all used to getting a game at the end, aren't they? So you just say, well, you know what we're doing here, we're starting with what you get at the end, we're just doing it at the start. And all right, we can get on board with that, no arguments here. But this idea actually of sort of introducing something that's more comfortable than moving is actually a form of methodological periodization. You're informally, through the session and through a period of time, introducing them to your methodology. You're not throwing them in at the deep end. You're not throwing yourself in at the deep end. You're saying, here's something I'm going to give you as a little bit of an introduction to get used to the idea of a games-based approach. And I'm going to then layer into that additional bits and pieces as I feel that you're ready to take them on. And we'll do it together almost. I'll try and stretch you. And if I feel like it's gone too far, we'll sort of come back. And you guys can earn the right to move on to the next stage. And that can be hugely motivational. So the first thing was this idea about methodological periodization. I've been talking about that a lot. And I think a lot of people who kind of adopt, say, let's say a games-based approach, like go at it all guns blazing and then think, oh God, because it can be difficult, get a lot of pushback, and then it's almost like, oh no, and then it becomes too uncomfortable for everybody. So I've definitely had some experiences of that. And then the other thing I wanted to reflect on, and it just occurred to me a minute ago, is your idea, because I remember I think we talked about Outwork, Outthink, Outplay on your show, I think. And I don't know whether, when I was on your show, and when my son's football coach, who's I'm his son's hockey coach, so we're kind of swapping over a little bit. He does Outwork, Outthink, Outplay. So you guys, I think, have had a good had an influence on him, or we've had an influence on him. But I think that, so you know how in the pro game they have this lovely buzzword at the moment called tactical periodization. I think that's a form of tactical periodization. Yeah. Because what you're doing is you're saying we're going to introduce some concepts that are going to be important for a group of players to be able to take on board playing football, the idea of playing football. It's going to take work. It's going to take you to think, and then and by working and thinking, you're then going to be able to do things that enable you to play really effectively. And I think it's a really nice, simple framework to adopt tactical periodization into, say, a grassroots idea. I don't know if you've ever thought about that.
You've made it sound much more professional than we ever thought about it, but I like it. We'll take it. Yeah. But that is it, Stuart. I think I've written down here concept coach, or actually concept facilitator, because I think that's our job. It's to kind of facilitate concepts rather than solutions, and we work with under 8. So, they need to find their way of thinking and seeing the game, but you've got to give them something, right? Like you say, you can't just throw the ball in there, right? And there's a game of football, there's a goal either end, so you can score the most goals. You've got to give them some ideas around stuff. And, and actually, a good work ethic, I think, is fundamental to being successful in probably life, let alone just in football. Yeah. Being able to think and make good decisions, again, I think is fundamental in football. And then being able to, be able to technically have the ability to play well, again, is fundamental for being successful. So I don't think these things are revolutionary, but they're concepts. And I don't think you can go far wrong if you focus on those. Now, we spent a long time over the summer. I think, Stu, the ones we might have spoke about before, the year before, we were working on get on the ball, make good choices, and play tough, wasn't it? That was the under 7s thing. So we kind of evolved it to these 3 things this season. Okay. So we over the summer. So it may have been different when we spoke to you last time. I don't think it was that early when we decided on these ones, but we just wanted. I think 3 is a good number for remembering stuff. But it just seemed let's give the players the concepts. And then if we can think ourselves internally what that would look like in practice without necessarily telling the players overtly that, let's see what they come up with. It just seemed like a good way of going about it. And if it is tactical periodization, we'll take that. But it does seem to be a good fit along with that. But for us, it's more, in some ways, giving us license to coach, but also constraining us so we don't overcoach. Because I think there's a danger of overcoaching too, especially when you're a grassroots coach, a volunteer parent really helping out. I think you just can almost get too carried away. Yeah. And unlike academies, we've got matches on Sundays, and you want to be competitive. Then it isn't the priority, but we've got to try and build a team, not just individual players. So you're trying to do both, which I think can be challenging as well. And this enables us to do that without hopefully going too far one way or too far the other.
I'd love to discuss that in more detail with you, because I think that's a real difficulty. And I have a little bit of a bugbear. And so the whole Freeplay kind of, joy of the people, Salisbury Rovers, Debbie Sayers thing, I love all that, right? And I think it's a real ideal of mine that kids have more of a free play type experience. But so my son, his coach, they play in a league, and he is amazing, right? Because he really buys into the ethos of, being player-centered and wanting the experience to be something that the young players enjoy and they come back for. And he has brilliant retention rates, and week in, week out, they come in and they want to be involved. But the difficulty is that they're not the strongest group of players. There's ranges of different experiences, there's ranges of different physical capabilities, there's ranges of different kind of game understanding and all that sort of stuff. And they more often than not they lose really quite heavily, and it's difficult. It's really difficult for I can see the parents getting frustrated. I hear them talking about it. I have to admit, on occasion, sort of find it kind of difficult to sort of watch and observe, and so I find myself having chats with him and talking about have you thought about, and this, that, and the other, and we play tennis together and stuff, so we can have this kind of informal conversation and all that sort of stuff. But it's really hard, and the reason it's hard is because you've got to get the team out on the weekend, and they have to have a good experience, and you feel like you've got to give them a sense of how to be able to play, so that they're not constantly on the receiving end. And I know it would be relatively straightforward for him to go, right, you guys got to do this, 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 and this, and it would probably stem the tide. They wouldn't lose as heavily. They'd probably feel slightly better about it. But he's resisting that because he wants them to develop as individuals, and he doesn't want to create the structure. But the tension between those two things must be really difficult. And I just wonder whether moving away from that league format might help grassroots coaches, but I don't see an end to it, because it's such a sort of it's such a thing that's prevalent particularly in football. But I don't know, do you guys feel that pressure as well? Do you feel that tension between wanting to allow that natural organic development but the need to get the players and the team organised for the weekend?
The hardest thing, I think, is in grassroots football, which is kind of all we really know. And I know other sports have probably got similar stories, or maybe very different stories, but in grassroots football, there is still very much, I'm going to say, there is very much a win at all cost mentality for the majority of people we play against. Yeah. Now, sure, I'll say categorically, and I've said it before, I have no issue with wanting to win. I want our players to want to win, and I've never gone to one game not wanting to win it. I think it's a question of how much you're willing to compromise the development of the players for the result of the game. That's the question there. Now, honestly, we fully rotate all our players in our games, including goalkeepers. Everyone plays at least two positions. Everyone plays equal playing time. But the reason we can do that, I think, part of that is because we got things quite right at an early age with these players. So they're competitive. They're a good little team because we managed to they're all from one school. So we've not gone cherry picked players from around the country to put a little dream team together. But they're good little players. But we've done the right things from now. I see other grassroots coaches like us that were like we were 5 years ago that haven't done the right things, and no fault of their own, just because like we were just kind of going through that wilderness, trying to find solutions to problems you didn't know were going to even existed with the players that you've got on that journey with you. And they rock up and they're getting beaten heavily every week. So what they do then is they revert to tried and tested positions, playing more direct, playing the stronger players for a bit longer on the pitches, which I totally understand. But that's when you compromise the development of the players and their experience. And potentially that's when you lose them when they get to 13, 14 years old, when there's more competition for things they can do in their spare time. Yeah. So it's a real juggling act to get both right. But the earlier you can create an effective team with the right practices, the better. But even if it's late for that, then I think the challenge then is, you know what, the benefit of football in this country, there's so many places to play and different levels. So park your ego and go and play at a level that's right for the players, that allows you to take development choices. Don't worry about being in League One or Division 1 or Division 2. Go down to Division 3 or 4 if you need to. If it means you can rotate your players around and try more things and get on the ball more, forget about the nonsense of being in division or the results. Who cares if an under-11s team beats an under-11s team? It doesn't matter. Just get the players in a place where they can enjoy their football and try different things, and give you the space to be able to make good choices as a coach. And And I think we've got no excuse in football in this country because it's so many opportunities to play in different leagues and different levels that it's not like some sports where really you might only have one league you can play in on your doorstep, and that's the kind you're stuck there and you've got to play the strong teams every week. That's not the case with football. Yeah. And I think it's the ego sometimes get in the way. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to the coaches out there because they're all doing the best they can, I think, in many cases. But I think if you could just get over your ego a little bit and just embrace the fact actually making choices that are better for the player's development is much more important than the result of the game. It doesn't matter what level you're playing at. That's going to be the bit where you enjoy it more as a coach, and certainly players enjoy it more. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. We got very similar views. Like, the one word for me is being competitive. I think that we play for under 8s, under 9s, under 10s, under 11s. It's defined as non-competitive football by the FA, which is nonsense. It is competitive football. The coaches want to win, the players want to win, the parents want to win, and you can hear that on the touchline every week. And
it's a sport, so it has to be competitive. Sport is competitive. You can't take that out of it. Yeah. But what you could take the focus off the result to make it child-centred, which I think is the important bit. Sorry, Mark.
But I think you want your players to be competitive for definite, and I think that the games-based approach enables that or encourages players to be competitive. And I think the other critical thing is getting it right at a very early age in terms of creating that kind of environment where
it helps a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Where you have fun, and you want every player to have fun. I mean, there's no point in them playing football, right? Even I play football now, not very well, but I want to go and have fun. I want to enjoy myself. But it's got to be an element of serious fun as well. Yeah. They need to be learning, and it needs to be in a reasonably competitive, safe environment. And I think those things are critical. I just think it's a really hard area because you have a lot of coaches that kind of say the right things, but actually when it comes to match day, they don't put into practice what they say, and it does become about the result, and that's it.
Sure. Doing the podcast, it's probably the biggest thing that's come to us. I mean, we get a little bit of feedback from people out there, and it's quite, in some ways, it's quite scary to hear the experiences that people are going through with parents, their own players, with oppositions and stuff. I mean, it can be a real nasty environment out there, and you're talking at the young age groups. I mean, under 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s, it can be quite scary what goes on. And you think actually in most other areas of life, you wouldn't allow players or young people to be in those kind of environments, but it is accepted, especially in grassroots football, and we've got a duty to try and make it better. But Mark's right. I mean, I talk a good game, and I think I practice most of what I preach. But don't get me wrong, on a Sunday, you still get in the moment, and you want the players to do well, and you get frustrated when it doesn't go quite right. And I think I'm on the good side of stuff most of the time, but I still find myself in this, getting lost in the moment sometimes. So I'm not trying to judge anybody, but we've just got a lot of work to do to try and make it a much more consistently positive experience for more players out there, I think, particularly in the boys' game I hear compared to the girls, but I'm sure it happens all over.
Across the board, yeah.
Stuart, I'll give you... Go on, sorry, Mark.
I'll give you a good example actually from the match on Sunday, and I won't kind of mention names or teams, but the team we're playing Sunday, the two coaches, we spoke to them before. They seemed very kind of nice guys and things. And I was kind of, Scott generally takes position one end of the pitch, and I kind of take the position the other end, just so we get a better view of what's going on.
From both ends of the pitch.
Exactly, yeah. We get both of us shouting. But during the game, and the opposition, it was at the opposition's ground, and the opposition own referee. And during the game, the opposition coaches were shouting at the referee all of the time, asking for free kicks, asking for throw-ins, and it just got to the point where I just thought, I said to them, guys, this is underage football. You don't need to be shouting at the referee calling for these things. Just let the referee do his job. Just let your players have fun. This is underage football. This is not adult football. And that's a kind of example what you get a lot on a Sunday morning.
That's their own coach with their own referee, which is one of their coaches from one of the other groups. But still, what's nice about it is we go to games now, I said to the ref before the game, I didn't know what was going to happen in the game with their coaches, but I said, the ref come and chat. I said, honestly, he said, we try and let things go here and stuff. I said, honestly, ref, absolutely fine. I promise you, give whatever you want. Our boys will not complain. And going back to the bit from the beginning is we've taught the boys about resilience and about not complaining and expect nothing, just keep playing the game. So I can go to games quite comfortable that the boys won't get upset or cry or moan if the decision doesn't go their way, because we've done that right in training from day one, which again is one of those things where I don't go too much worried about the players' reactions in the moment, because they're good boys. I mean, they're good kids, because we've tried to do the right thing in training, because we've learned from what we got wrong the first time round. And all those little things add up to make the whole experience much more pleasant for you as the coach and for the players, because you're not thinking about all the silly nonsense stuff that goes on, which other coaches have to think about because maybe they've not got it quite right in their training sessions, or created the environment that enables them to go to the games more comfortable and confident that there won't be other issues. That's not to say we're perfect. We get lots of things wrong still, but we've got a lot more right than we did previously.
Yeah. I wonder though, I suppose one of the things that I think is, if listen, and by the way, I'm back. I didn't know that the FA defined these age groups as non-competitive, because I think you're entirely right. I think that's it's a massive misnomer, because
it gets worse. It gets worse because what happens at under 12s, that it goes competitive. In language, which basically just gives that, you've got this nonsense up to under 12s where it's non-competitive, but it's not really. And then under 12s, it gives the coaches a license then to be able to say, right, I'm getting rid of the players that are no good. I'm going to not give equal playing time now, no more rotation. It's just crazy where, actually, let's face the fact, sport is competitive, it's absolutely fine, but it should just be child-centered. Now, the level of development over results maybe shift over the years. That's a philosophical approach. But to go from competitive, non-competitive just because a year changes, it really does create a whole can of worms around other stuff.
Well, it's not even a year, right? It's almost like the summer holidays. It's like with the 6 weeks of summer holidays, you playing under 11s non-competitive to under 12s competitive football. So
it doesn't help the language, but sorry, Stuart, I interrupted, but it doesn't help having those terms, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's kind of what I suppose I'm trying to explore really, is that I think that the competitive format makes for, and I've had this firsthand. So when I was working for England Rugby, we brought about a kind of change to the competitive landscape, and we went and basically said, right, so at certain age groups, up to a certain age, we're going to play festivals, and in those festivals, everybody gets the same number of games. So you're playing usually in a pool, and you play 4 games, and and all of those games are competitive. You compete. So by their very nature, like you say, games and sport, they're competitive. But we're just not going to have semi-finals and finals and cups and shields and the rest of that razzmatazz. And because I have physically seen it. So, you'd go along to a festival, and what you'd see is, yes, you'd probably still see the odd coach saying this, that, and the other. But the change in adult behaviour, both spectator and coach, between a festival which is, doesn't have all that, and a tournament which has the semi-finals and finals, is so marked, so different. And the behaviour in terms of game time, the behaviour in terms of aggression towards official, aggression towards opposition coach, aggression towards parent to parent aggression, and aggression towards the players. It's just hugely different. So I'm absolutely convinced that the format of competition does have quite a bearing on the experience, not just for the athlete, but also for the coach. And I feel sorry sometimes for coaches, because, that I feel it, and you guys have admitted to it, I feel the tension, because, that side of you that is one of your drivers and is part of your passion for the activity, that competitive driver, is very difficult to fight against. But if the format was different, so for example, if my team came to play your team, and we just basically said at the start of the game, right, how many you got, how many I got, right, what level are your guys, right, okay, so what we'll do is we'll agree, won't we, that we'll rotate, everyone will get the same playing time, yes, no problem. If it starts to get a bit one-sided, then I'll take off some of my better players and you take off some of your better players, or whatever, we'll rotate the keepers, everyone will get different game, and then we would make sure that it was a good game, wouldn't we? We would make sure that it was a really good game, it was close, and the closer the game, the better, because that's actually more competitive, way more fun. And I feel like when you've got a league and you've got league rules and you've got all that sort of stuff, it takes a very, very brave and committed individual to continue with that. Like my son's coach, he literally empties his bench every 15 minutes, right? He rotates on. He's absolutely committed to equal game time. And there's times he does it, and I think, you are the bravest man in the world. I have huge admiration for you, because I can't guarantee I would do that, because that part of me would want to just go, oh, I would definitely make sure that people weren't sitting on the bench all day long, but I might keep a few more players, might get a little bit more game time than others, particularly if they're not putting the work bit in. I would definitely be about that. You know, if they haven't committed to actually working hard for each other and everything else. But it's amazing. He's just absolutely relentless on equal game time and just empty the bench. You guys go on, have a great time, off you go. And it's 14-0. You know, and I think to myself, that takes a very committed individual. So I just wonder if we could change the format a bit. Maybe it would just make it easier for people to be able to create the experiences they want to create.
I think coaches would enjoy it a whole lot more if that was the case.
Yeah,
there's a couple of possibilities. Look, I think why couldn't you? Quite often in the grassroots foundation phase football, you play 4 quarters of 10 minutes. So why couldn't you just play like the 1-0 game each quarter? So you can never be losing by more than a goal on a score sheet. So if coach worried about the score sheet, you could say, right, for this 10 minutes, if you win the quarter, it's 1-0 to you. If we draw, it's 1-1. If you lose, it's 0 to you. So the worst you can lose a game by is 4-0 on paper. So what it means as a coach, now I can try things out. I can experiment. I'm not too bothered. The players know this now, so they're not worried too much about the score. They can make mistakes. They can try and do the things your coach wants to work on with the players. And no one really cares about the score because you're trying different things out. What I think we see more is the score does matter to the coaches a lot. The result does matter. And if they're playing, because we've got quite a good little team, teams that play against us tend to go more tried and tested. They'll often have they'll have one goalkeeper. Usually they'll kick the ball long and do more direct. And I think fair play, because you're competing against us and giving us a good game and potentially beating us. But the development for the players is highly questionable. Or I think actually, if we could take the scoreline out of the equation, everyone could do a whole lot more, and the players would get a much better benefit. And you know what? Then once that gets through to the parents as well, people will stop coming to worry about the result. They'll come to watch their kid play some football, which really is what they want to do. And it's the moment that gets lost, and it's the adultification of the game that takes over in the moment. And we watch so much Premier League and Championship football and Champions League football that I think it's really hard then to switch that mindset when you're watching a game, even if it is just a 5-a-side on the sevens game, on a small pitch. You still kind of think actually it's about winning, and it shouldn't be about winning. It should be about the development of the players.
Yeah, you're spot on. And but even when you do 5-a-side at under sevens, it still looks like a proper game, right? Because you've got smaller players, a smaller pitch, but it looks like the proper game.
You have parents arguing, Stuart, with themselves over things. You have parents arguing with refs under sevens games. I mean, you just hear it's ridiculous what happens, and you kind of think, well, that can only be the fact that people care too much about what's going on, and we've got to move it away. Because actually, if you only care about the development of your child, then you focus on the important thing: is my player getting enough game time? Are they getting different positions to play in and stuff? And that becomes the thing. And actually, if that doesn't happen, then you should be able to moan about it. But it will happen if you actually change the format in some way, shape, or form to allow it to happen. And it's a big ask.
In the same way that, we talk about like using a games-based approach or a constraints-led approach, the principal idea there is that, human beings, and any organism for that matter, will adapt to changes in its environment. And I think the same applies to us organisms, as in coaches and parents and spectators and everybody else, that if we could change the environment within which the competitive environment, I feel like everybody could kind of, I think the environment sort of creates some of the behavior. So, I mean, I love that idea, by the way, of like the 4 quarters and the 1-0 game. There's something lovely about that. But I also like the idea that, for example, you then have a bit more freedom to say, right, I'd even go as far as to say, if we were agreeing before the game, I'd say, right, what have you guys been working on this week? Oh, we're working on, outletting from the back. Okay, great. What I'll get my players to do then is we'll drop off a little bit, give your guys a little chance to be able to play some outlet play before we start to go and press the ball. We get a good developmental experience from that. And then the weird thing about all this, by the way, is if we got those kind of really nice close games, that's more competitive.
100%.
So the thing that we want,
Yeah, well, we called it collaborative training matches. Yeah. So you work with the opposition, actually agree what we're going to do. So, like you say, you might be, you might be wanting to work on, switch in place. We could set up a formation which allows you to switch play against us to really give you a chance to do it all. So you're challenging both teams, and that's what it should be about, working together, not against your local neighbours. And it's crazy that you get rivalries at under 8s in your local teams. But where actually what you should be doing is talking to the local managers and saying, right, what are you doing this week? If you've got a strong player, well, let's we'll play a formation with this 2 against your strong player to make it challenging for them. And you can work so much smarter, I think, and it'll be such a benefit for not just the players but for the whole country and the whole football development for that grassroots space, because it will lift the whole foundation up, I think, which has got a lot better anyway, I think, over the last 5 to 10 years, but it could get so much better, couldn't it, with that definitely. Kind of I think collaborative working together.
I think between us, we've just created a new concept. You talked about being a concept facilitator, which I love, by the way. I think that's the title of the podcast. A concept facilitator. Here's a new concept for the world of grassroots football. What we want is collaboration.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. Work with your neighbours, not against them. Don't worry about your egos. Work with them and find a way to have a good, fun game and take away the nonsense of, we beat the local team 4-3 this week. No, what did we do to work with them to create a real nice game? Yeah. There you go. I think that would be that's our next objective.
That's our new campaign.
Where we're at.
Just before we we start off as usual, hour and a half in and just getting going. Before I start to sort of bring us to a close, one thought I just wanted to ask you about really was on this sort of developmental journey that you guys have been on with the games-based approach and constraints and everything else, whilst we're in our little mini community of learning here, what are the things that you are challenged by, or what are the areas that you still feel that you would like to be able to, improve upon, or areas that you find difficult, or even potentially just, some thoughts or questions or observations through the journey that you want to kind of explore with me while we're on? There you go. Big question, that.
It's a big question.
I've got a question. My own personal areas to kind of work on, do you mean, Stuart, like as a coach?
Yeah, either as you as a team or you as individuals, either, really.
Well, what I know is, I think, for me personally, I know that I've got to improve a lot on my observation and my communication. So you miss so much stuff when you're coaching, don't you? And I've got to get better at seeing more stuff, particularly in the games as well, and then finding a way to communicate that back more effectively. I'm proud of the environment we've created with the players, and I'm proud of the tone we use with the players. But I think I could be a much more effective coach if I can improve my ability to see more stuff and then get that across in a more articulate fashion. I think that's 2 things that I've set myself for this year to work on.
Yeah, so you're talking about, yeah, it's massive. I don't know where to start. So you're referring to interventions, that kind of, when and how you get it across?
Honestly, everything. So with the training sessions themselves, plus the matches as well. I often find matches, you're really good at this. So we'll go and see matches together, and Mark will make a couple of comments about what he's seen. I haven't even seen it. I haven't even recognised what's going on. And then I notice it because he's highlighted it to me, because I'm so fixed on 1 or 2 things that I miss lots of other stuff. So I've got to really work on that. And then how I actually articulate that across both in the moment, or on reflection afterwards, I could get a lot better at those things, that's for sure. And I need to work on that.
Yeah, I think that similar to what you're saying, but the challenge for me, I think, is around when there is an intervention, should I be using a individual intervention, pulling the player off, having a chat with them? I don't feel like as a coach I do a lot of that, and I think I should do more of that. And maybe I'm conscious of the fact that if I take him off, then if he's in training, it's going to create a 5v4 or a 4v3, or it's going to mix it up a little bit. What does it matter? In a match, if I take him off, then we're a player short. Actually, what does it matter? It doesn't really make a lot of difference. It's kind of having that kind of discipline, or that executing that kind of intervention, and then also differentiate between the team intervention, and then just walk around and have a little chats with the players as well whilst they're playing. I think for me, as you get more experience in coaching, I feel like I've come a long way in that space. But when I go and observe sessions, I think, oh, that person looks really good at that, or that person does that really well. And then I think, well, I'm going to try that. But actually, when it comes to the session, then I don't quite execute it as I want to.
Stu, with a team thing, one thing to add then, I think what is challenging when you take a games-based approach is the minute you try and move back away from that with the players towards something maybe more practice-based, the players, they notice that it's really hard. Then I'm not going back to drills and cues, but certainly anything that's not a game becomes more of a sell. You've got to really sell it to the players to do it. It makes you really think about your practices that aren't games-based, because the players' engagement level is not quite as there if it's not fun, because they're used to playing some really, everything's games, scores, challenges and things. So that's one thing I've learned every time I move away from doing a games-based practice in the sessions. It's got to be a good one, otherwise the boys won't buy into it. It's a challenge.
And Stu, maybe one you could maybe help us with as well is games-based approach works really well in the foundation phase, probably even in under 11s.
Yep.
However, as you get into the youth development phase, which the FA define as, I think, under 12 upwards, the game gets bigger in terms of numbers. So you're 9-a-side, it gets more tactical. I guess it's still as technical, but it gets more tactical around formations and things like that. Does a games-based approach work as well in those age groups as it does in the foundation phase? And that's something I haven't got a lot of experience of coaching those older age groups, so I'm not kind of 100% clear either way.
Interesting. I would actually, well, my view is, and why, sorry, just so I'm clear on this, right? What stimulates that question in terms of when you say, does it apply in the context where it's sort of, where things get a bit more tactical? How do you mean?
Well, I think like as I guess you would start to have maybe unit type approaches in terms of how you do your training. So you may have a focus on your defenders. You may kind of take your defenders away and work with defenders, or you might take your strikers away and work with strikers. I guess as you get older in the age groups, players become a bit more specialised in their positions. They're not kind of rotating around a lot. They still probably do rotation, but not quite as much.
And it's easier, I guess, doing games-based, because the 5 and 7-a-side format, you can almost play a game with all the players and it kind of fits into 5 and 7-a-side. I guess at 9 or 11-a-side, you won't have 22 players, I guess, is the first thing. And, there's so much going on there that I guess it is harder with the bigger format. But
that's where
we'll do a podcast on that one. We'll be listening.
Well, that's I think where the difference between the constraints-led approach and the games-based approach is. So a games-based approach will be, in general, you will be playing a game, but within the constraints-led approach, more practice forms are viable within a constraints-led approach. So, for example, you don't have to have what you would traditionally classify as a game in the constraints-led approach. You would do something that's more like what I would describe as, say, a variable practice. So what that is not something that hasn't got all the elements of the game, but there's still variability within it. There's still different opportunities for action, but but it's much more focused on a specific aspect of gameplay. And you would do that with a group of players who, for example, have more kind of technical capability or whatever it might be, because it's less exploratory. It's more about execution or exploiting opportunities. And so therefore you're designing practice that's very specific to particular game interactions. But that's actually perfectly feasible within the foundation phase too. I mean, you're doing a version of that anyway within the game. You're doing it within the game, so you're doing the game within the game. Something that the Magic Academy boys talk a lot about, beating the game and having the game within the game. But it's just as possible in a kind of, they talk about whole, part, whole.
Yeah.
The idea of, game. Well, it's actually just, I don't call it whole, part, whole. I sort of call it whole, slightly less of the whole, slightly less of the whole, slightly less of the whole, So all you're doing is removing elements in order to just have less complexity or less chaos in order to create a little bit more focus. Yeah. And so I think in fact, I find it really effective as a learning tool or a learning approach with, I coach adults in this way, or, I've got an under 14s group that I work with, and we're actually just exploring at the moment, two things really, like you say, counter coaching. We're exploring how do we get the ball out from the back, and how do we organize to win the ball in attacking areas to be able to counter attack fast. So we're basically doing counter pressing and outletting at the same time. And I design games.
Improving one, you improve on the other, right?
Yeah, so I'm just designing practices that enable that. And I might design a smaller practice that might be a 4v4 game that requires both things to take place in a much smaller pitch. And then we try and transfer the same conceptual ideas into the bigger format that might be 6v6, 7v7.
Yeah. I see how that works, yeah. Yep.
The other thing I was just going to share with you is my work on is something that I learned. I don't know whether you had a chance to hear the show I did or the podcast I did with Stephen Rolnick before Christmas. He, this idea of motivational interviewing, and it's really brought home to me a few areas that I'd sort of lost sight of. So one of them is having the strengths goggles on. So I've been trying to do this for some time, which is to only invoke the positive. So look for moments where you see moments of, like you say, whether it's outthink, outwork, outplay, and drawing attention to those in a very big way. So trying to keep the strengths lenses on, because, I'm pretty conditioned to look for either error or look for moments of struggle and trying to support and help those, to use a mistake as a coaching moment or to use a struggle as a coaching moment. But I'm trying to flip it and trying to keep the strengths lenses on and try and draw out those strengths. And the way of drawing them out is, and this is the other area of work on for me, is to stop using banal praise and to start to use affirmation. So this fundamental difference between saying that was brilliant and saying, I love the way you looked up and saw the pass and gave the ball. Now, that sounds like it's not fundamentally different, but I can promise you it is absolutely transformatively different, and I'm not very good at it. So they're my big work-ons.
Oh, it's so true. Being specific, isn't it? And I think the other thing with the young kids is they see through nonsense, don't they? If you're just saying it for the sake of saying, they see through it straight away and it loses its value. But if you can be specific about your feedback, that's so true. That works so well. And you're right, I listened to that podcast episode, and it got me thinking about making sure that we not just highlight strengths, but also some weeks actually just have strengths, focus on the things the players can do. Just go and do what you can do today. Just go out there and show off and do what you can do. Rather than always working on something that you can't do or trying to get something you can't do some weeks. Just go out there and actually for 20 minutes of a session or the whole session, just what you're really good at, right? Go and show us that. Enjoy it, do that then in this game. And I think that's a real positive thing as well. And that was one of my New Year's resolutions to myself after listening to the episode that you did before Christmas. So.
But it's amazing, the conversation around strengths is really interesting because even at work, right? So I've done some stuff at work recently with, I'm in part of a kind of a new team. And as part of being part of this new team, we did some stuff on our strengths. What are our strengths? And lots of people in work have done these kinds of things. There's various different tools that you can use. And then I had a conversation with my boss, and he said to me, get your strength thing out. So we got it out. We were comparing and just chatting about it. And he says, how can I help you play to your strengths? And I've spent the majority of my career trying to iron out my weaknesses, and it's exhausting. And to have someone come along as a boss and say, how can I help you play to your strengths? How can I make the most out of your strengths? It was almost like this liberating moment. And I said to him a few days later, I said, that's like one of the best conversations I've ever had with a manager. I've never had someone ask me how to play to my strengths. So if that's how powerful it is to me, imagine how powerful it could be to an 8 or 9-year-old.
Exactly. Yeah. And how crazy do we have to say it though? But it's so true. But we just don't do it, do we? Yeah. But it's crazy that we don't.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there was a podcast. I can't remember what podcast it was. It was someone else's podcast. There are other podcasts out there to listen to, believe it or not. And they had a long discussion around as a coach, do you want to build on your strengths to get those even stronger, or do you want to develop your kind of weaknesses? And it was a really kind of interesting conversation, actually, because naturally you always think, right, these are the things I don't do very well. These are the things I need to work on, rather than thinking, these are what I do really well. Actually, I could do those even better. Yeah.
The irony has not been lost on me, by the way, that I started this conversation by asking you what your work-ons were. Why didn't I start the conversation by saying, what are your strengths, fellas?
True, there we go.
So that's another work-on in my world of coach development as well. I've got to start asking different questions.
Habits die hard, don't that's the problem, I think. Habits die hard.
There you go. I had to get that in before I got a mailbag full of people saying, by the way, did you realize? Yeah, so anyway. Hey, listen, I've really loved catching up with you guys. It's been a great way to sort of start the new decade. I love what you're doing. I love the way you're so honest and prepared to, share the good, the bad and the ugly of this. I genuinely, I've always been in huge admiration of, and to me, the most undervalued person in the world of sport, which is the grassroots coach, that person who's having to deal with all the difficulties that we've just talked about, but is there facilitating a sports experience for a group of children who otherwise may not have that experience. And the fact that you're prepared to share experiences with others and help others on that kind of learning journey, I think is a really fantastic thing. So, I'm really glad you're doing what you're doing. And the fact that I've played some kind of role in helping you do that is brilliant as far as I'm concerned. So I've really enjoyed you coming on.
You are solely responsible. Don't. It's all your fault.
It's all my fault.
It's been awesome, Stuart. Thank you so much. And genuinely, we are massive fans of your episodes and your podcast. So please keep them coming. And we learn so much from it, and it helps us then share some of that stuff out and develop ourselves as well. So we're really grateful. So please keep it going, and we're looking forward to the episodes you've got coming up throughout the year.
Yeah. So anybody who hasn't heard of you before, hasn't found the show and found a bit about what you're doing, what's the best place for them to either find you or if they want to ask you some questions or get in touch, how can they do so?
Yeah. Brilliant. So the podcast is the Soccer Coaching Podcast, and you should be able to get us on all the major platforms really that are out there. So that should be easy enough. We've got a Twitter handle, which is Soccer Coach Cast. And we have got a website as well, which is www.thesoccercoachingpodcast.com. And if you really want to, you can email us, and that would be either mark@soccercoachingpodcast.com or me, which is scott@thesoccercoachingpodcast.com. But really Twitter, we're a little bit active on Twitter. The episodes go up there and stuff. But what's really great is getting feedback from the coaches about, what they want us to cover, what's worked for them, just really hearing how, what's going on in the big wide world out there, because that it kind of steers us to what we can talk about and where we might have some use, and hopefully share some ideas and thoughts around those kind of themes and stuff.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. And thanks, Stu. Thanks. It's been an honour coming on. So it's great to speak with you. So thank you very much for having us.
No. The pleasure was all mine. And thank you for, I've always said the show's only as good as its guests, and you've been fantastic. So I've really enjoyed it. So thanks very much.
Brilliant, Stu. Thanks very much. All the best. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.